It is time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Athletic's David Ornstein and Martin Hardy from The Times. Welcome along to both chats. We'll speak to you in just a couple of minutes. We'll run you through the Back Pages first. Here is how they look. We start off with The Mirror, who go with the headline Arctic flunkies, Pep's side freeze as Norwegian minnows stun City's All-Stars. So yes, City in one of the early kickoffs losing by 3-1 away to Bodo Glimt. Who would have thought it? Also, Mo Salah there potentially coming back for Liverpool away to Marseille, and then you can see the results on the right-hand side. Arsenal winning it into Milan, and Tottenham victorious at home to Dortmund, which is significant potentially for Thomas Frank. Let's move on to the Express. Circle of Hell. Yes, the Arctic Circle where Manchester City were playing. Pep admits that things going against us after humbling by Arctic minnows. And you can see all the other stories that I've just discussed with Spurs and Arsenal winning, and Mo Salah set to return for Arne Slot in the Champions League. Let's head now to the Star. Only fools and Norses. Like that headline there in the Star. Lovely jubbly for minnows as Pep stars flop again. And the key quote in this one, everything is going wrong, says Pep Guardiola. On we go to The Guardian. You have a slightly different selection of stories there. You can see the red card for Rodri as the City lost away to Bodo Glimt, but you can see at the top there, Frank relief Spurs' pressure on manager with Dortmund. But on the right-hand side there, Rob Key, managing director of England men's cricket, looks like he'll be staying on despite the Ashes humiliation that England suffered down under. Let's take you to the Telegraph as well. And you can see Dominic Solanke scoring and celebrating. I mean, it was admittedly a little bit of a, let's say, kind of not intended strike and goal from close range for Dominic Solanke. But, you know, they all count. Tottenham 2, Dortmund 0, the final score there. Haaland left embarrassed by City defeat. And you can see there that same story that we saw in The Guardian about the future of Rob Key after the review into what happened with England in Australia. Right, welcome once again to David and to Martin. We've got plenty to get through, so let's start off with Manchester City. And if we look at the back page of The Mirror, Arctic flunkies is the headline that they've gone for. Pep side freeze as Norwegians and minnows stun City's All-Stars. And again, I'll say this quote outright in Simon Bukowski's piece. Pep Guardiola admitted feeling like everything is going wrong. And of course, it comes hot on the heels of their defeat in the Manchester derby as well, where they were completely outplayed by Manchester United, were pretty poor at Old Trafford. David, let me come to you first. How big a shock is this result for you?
It's a huge shock. It's Bodo Glimt's first ever Champions League victory against the team as heralded as Manchester City. Yeah, they were depleted by some injuries. They don't have Semenyo at their disposal at this stage of the competition. Mark Gahey's still to come in. And they've had a bruising start to the year. I think it's just 2 wins in 7, and that included a victory over Exeter. Really, the Newcastle League Cup game was their only decent performance in that run. And they would have been expected to win, certainly, potentially handsomely tonight. I know it's an artificial pitch as well, which we've seen with Crystal Palace at Macclesfield recently as something of a leveller. That's extremely concerning from City's perspective. Bodo Glimt are in the bottom part of the Champions League group stage. They may now have a chance to get through. Manchester City have a task to make it into the automatic qualification position. So that's worrying for sure. And Manchester City need to get back into their rhythm as soon as possible. Otherwise, it could unravel their season, even though they're still fighting in all competitions.
Yeah, do you know what? On that very point, you've provided the perfect segue for me, David. Thank you. Looking at the Times, and again, this quote, I mean, it's 4 massive words, really, for Pep Guardiola. Everything is going wrong. What is the danger of this really hitting their season hard, Martin, and things just unravelling from here on in?
Well, it's funny how quickly things turn. To kind of echo David there, we have Macclesfield beating the FA Cup holders a week and a half ago. Now we have this today, which just reminds you what a brilliant game football is, and the fact that you can take nothing for granted. This is a place with a population that you could probably squeeze into the Etihad Stadium. That is how massive a result this is. It's incredible. The language of Pep is very, very, very strange in that it sounds very defeatist. this is still an extremely strong Manchester City team that he's put out there. Yes, Mark Gay couldn't play and Semenyo can't play and he's missing two normal central defenders, but this is Manchester City, one of the richest clubs in the world. They have to absorb injuries like this. They recall a defender, Max Lane, from Watford, and he plays very well against Newcastle. So they're not playing 15-year-old kids here, and they are playing a team that hasn't played for 6 weeks. We could be approaching a huge turning point in the Premier League. That by the end of this season, Michael Carrick, Manchester United might be looking for a new manager if Michael Carrick leaves. Is this to be Pep Guardiola's final season? There's uncertainty at Liverpool with Arne Slot. So you could have three ginormous clubs all going for a new manager at the same time. That language, there's an apology as well from Erling Haaland back in his homeland. Who would have thought he'd be one of the worst Norwegian players on that pitch tonight? For him, it really will be embarrassing going back with a team that were European Cup winners or Champions League winners a couple of seasons ago. And this was not a one-off win. They were, fairly well beaten. Rodri's dismissal was probably a daft element to throw into the mix as well. And they never really got it going later on. The impact on Haaland and Guardiola and their language, which feels very defeatist, is very interesting, and kind of where they go from here. They have to try and stay in a title race that thus far that squad doesn't necessarily seem like it's ready for. And we're watching Arsenal at the minute with their relentlessness, certainly in European football as well, look like the team that nobody in England can stop.
OK, let's have a look at the Sun as we reflect on Tottenham Hotspur. And, they're doing well in Europe. They're fourth in the Champions League table with 14 points from their 7 games. Haven't lost at home in Europe for a while now. And this was a result that Thomas Frank really, really needed, given the scrutiny that he's under, the pressure on him as head coach. Frank Hugh is the headline. Huge win, relief for Spurs. I just wonder, David, how much time do you think this might buy him? Or do you think if they don't win at Burnley on Saturday, ultimately he's still a goner?
Well, there's a huge amount of goodwill behind Thomas Frank within the corridors of power at Tottenham, extending to the ownership and chief executive Vinay Venkatesham, and they're the ones who will make the decision on his future. It's an absolutely enormous result for him tonight. Make no mistake about that. Imagine the atmosphere inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium if they'd lost again off the back of those 3 domestic defeats, the performances, the rancor that has been running through the fan base. It seemed that he was a dead man walking, and many of us have reported it feels a case of when rather than if he goes, and naturally they need to maintain this. But he's going to give himself every chance of staying in the job if he keeps getting results, because those who are in authority at the club want him to succeed. Yeah, I'm sure many of the players have been unhappy with what's happening recently, and some of them may not be in favour of him, but they turned up for him tonight, and that was a really good performance on the whole. Dortmund were uncharacteristically poor, and they had the red card, which helped. But I think Tottenham influenced that heavily, and they'll be delighted to have Solanke back and in the goals by hook or by crook. Obviously, it was a bit controversial to overlook Tell for the Champions League squad, but Solanke led by example, and they had some good performances, the likes of Udogie back in the side and Romero leading by example in the right way. And across the team, it was a much more positive atmosphere. And so let's not get away from the fact that he remains under huge pressure and scrutiny, and performances, results have fallen well below where Tottenham expect to be, their fans certainly. But they're not planning for his exit. That's why we've reported there's no contingencies in place, even though naturally you'd be looking at coaches, because they want to go forward with Frank. He's a thoroughly decent man who hasn't deserved the level of abuse that's come his way, certainly on social media. But it's a results industry. He has to deliver, and tonight was a step in the right direction.
OK, so Tottenham 2-0 winners at home. Arsenal 3-1 winners away, Martin. If we look at the Mirror, Gab's the San hero for Art. So, yes, Gabriel Jesus scoring 2 and Vitziocra's getting the other away to Inter Milan. Did this feel again like that sort of statement win that Arsenal are starting to achieve more consistently, more regularly, and really cementing their reputation as one of Europe's top sides? Because they're the only team with 7 from 7.
Yeah, I think the last time I was on 2 weeks ago, we talked about the return of Gabriel Jesus and how important it was. And I think got picked up a little bit on social media. People saying you're talking about heroes of Cristiano Ronaldo returning. It wasn't that. It was a case of here is a very good centre forward. Might not be quite world class, but this will make real competition and strengthen the challenge of Arsenal. All these competitions, they should probably be clear in terms of the Carabao Cup semi-final. They were significantly better than Chelsea. That strength and depth, goal scorers starting to find their form in January. It must be manna from heaven for someone like and
The
I
weather's
think
poor here. I don't know.
I think you're starting to see this Arsenal team perhaps get more respect that it deserves. Arteta seems more relaxed than maybe he was 2 or 3 years ago. I'd still like to see him just calm down a little bit in his technical area where he looks as if he's about to run the pitch. But they are the team now that looks like they have the staying power. None of the excitement or the histrionics that's going on at the other clubs around them. With Tottenham, we're going from despair to joy in the space of 3 days. We're not quite sure what to make of Manchester City or Liverpool. Meanwhile, Arsenal are just continuing to get these results, and they're doing superbly in European football at the moment.
Yeah, they've definitely got some momentum, haven't they? All right, Martin, thank you very much indeed. And we're going to take a quick break, a couple of minutes, and when we come back, we'll take a look at more of the sports stories in the morning's papers, including this in The Guardian. We're chatting England cricket. Key stays on, but McCullum fate tied to T20 World Cup. See you in a sec. OK, guys, let's keep up the pace. Let's talk Mo Salah. It's been a while since he's been in the headlines. I'm sure you remember that 3-3 draw at Leeds and then his comments in the mix. And it seems an absolute age ago. And in the Mirror, Paul Gorst's piece, great for Mo to slot back in, insisting life with Mo Salah back at Liverpool is normal as it's always been? Do you think that things have thawed and that it will return to business as usual before his outbursts after the game at Ellen Road? David, come to you first on this.
We don't know, David, because we're not inside, and truthfully, only Liverpool will know the exact dynamics. It must have been pretty bad to get to the point that Mo Salah kicked off after that Leeds game. However, they did seem to smooth it over quite well with the absence against Inter Milan. Then he was reintegrated for that final game before he went, which he suggested was a farewell, but clearly not. In Liverpool's mind, he was staying, and that looks like it will be the case as the transfer window comes to a close, and at least until the end of the season. He'll then have 12 months left on his contract, and there's a decision for all parties to make. If it's going well, maybe they can continue. If it's not going well, then perhaps they look to have a conversation and go their separate ways. But looking at the pictures in the papers from training today, he's got a smile on his face. He's going to be back involved. Liverpool have missed his finishing. If he can re-find his form, which he did in the Africa Cup of Nations, then it will be a huge asset to Liverpool for the 4 months ahead. So certainly they're all the right soundings are coming from Anfield, but it will be on the pitch where we'll see if he's truly back to the Mo Salah we've come to know and expect.
Let's have a look at the eye and to talk Newcastle, who take on PSV at home in the Champions League tomorrow night. And then their final game in this league phase is away to the holders, Paris Saint-Germain. And Eddie Howe, just with this rallying call, Martin, make some history. Does it feel like this is a really critical game for the Newcastle boss?
Yeah, look, there's been an upturn in form in the last, say, a month or 6 weeks. Newcastle as a city will still hit a meltdown if there is a failure to score in a game or a failure to win in a game, which kind of followed Wolves. But Newcastle's home form has been excellent. Their Champions League form is good. A win tomorrow night against the PSV team that are flying in Holland, which we should really take note of. But a win takes Newcastle through to the that knockout phase in the Champions League, which would give them the possibility to go through to the knockout stage of the Champions League for the first time in their history. So this is a big moment. But as I said, Newcastle under the magic of St James's Park, Eddie Howe has played into that for the 4 years he's been in charge. Got that energy inside the stadium, especially in these Champions League games are still very, very special because they're still very new to the club under his regime and under the new ownership. Expect a great atmosphere tomorrow night. He spoke today about the possibility of Dan Burn not being far away from a return, Willis Sula possibly returning. So the squad feels a little bit stronger as well. And yeah, it's a game you think Newcastle can go and win this and get themselves into a great position in the Champions League. Still a season that Eddie Howe says, I'm a glass half full man. There is a very difficult, but it's still a semi-final at Manchester City to come. They're pushing to qualify for the Champions League in the Premier League, and they're through in the FA Cup. So yeah, there's an awful lot still to play for at Newcastle at the moment.
Can I just ask a question to you both about the Champions League with this format and the second season of it? We've got this expanded league, 8 games in the group phase. Is it producing the kind of jeopardy, the kind of drama that UEFA would like it to? What are your takes? David, to you first, and then Martin, if you could follow.
There have been some really good matches in the earlier stages of these 2 years. There have still been some less exciting ones, and maybe that will always be the case. I think the jeopardy that Manchester City faced last season, when it sort of went so tight and down to the wire, and PSG were there as well before finding their form and going on to win the title. Liverpool, despite finishing top, then went out at the last 16 stage. And I guess here we don't like change that much, but when it comes, it tends to be okay, and it has been in this sense. So I do think it is largely captivated. Of course, they're still searching the authorities for the exact right format. Maybe they'll never find it, but I don't think it's as bad as many anticipated, and it can probably still get better.
Martin?
Yeah, so some of the double headers between a team that was on 9 points and a team that was 0 points were getting towards being pointless games of football. You know, the Manchester City game and result tonight is a one-off game. There's no return leg. But Bodo Glimt haven't played in Manchester and been beaten 5-0 2 months ago. The game is very fresh. There's not the case that the teams have seen too much of each other. I think the old format was struggling. This is creating some excitement. It's still a very, very big league, and when the teams have played 5 games, you look and you think they could qualify, they could fall away. There's a lot of teams go through. The jeopardy, as David said there, doesn't come until late in the competition. But I think it's making it more exciting so far than what we had. So in that sense, I think it's succeeding and is better than what was before, but not quite perfect.
OK, let's change tack, shall we, and look at some cricket. The Daily Telegraph, they're talking about the review into England's Ashes tour, the roles particularly of 3 men. Rob Key, who is Managing Director of England Men's Cricket. Also Brendan McCullum, who is the head coach of both the red ball and white ball sides, and also Ben Stokes, the captain. And here it seems, in this exclusive from Noel McPherson and also Tom Morgan, that Rob Key seems to have assured his job for the time being, but that there's extra scrutiny now on Brendan McCullum, which is tied to England's performance at the T20 World Cup next month. David, what's your read on it? Is it fair that it should be the head coach who is the man in the most pressurised position, and that ultimately one tournament will decide his fate?
Well, it's fair that he is under scrutiny, because that was an absolute shambles of an Ashes yet again in Australia. The one test that England did win was a bit of a freak 2-day fiasco, really, in terms of the purists. And if you think back to the build-up, the expectations that were so high, this was meant to be the one for England, the lack of preparation, all being scrutinised now. He was involved in that. Some of the conduct during the Ashes, where we found out about players being on nights out and the break in Noosa, and then more revelations come to light about Harry Brook in New Zealand prior to the Ashes. A lot of that is down to the coach. They didn't take the chance to play the pink ball warm-up match before the pink ball test, so on and so forth, and the Bazball tactics that are coming under the microscope for the way England are playing. But he's not the only one. Key's at the top of the tree. That said, Key has many more responsibilities than just the England senior team. And he seems willing to adapt his ways. And judging by the reports in the papers, that's going to see him survive. McCullum at least is in Sri Lanka now for the short form games. It's been a rapid turnaround. They've got a fielding coach out there. And let's see how they do in the T20 World Cup. And Stokes is continuing, which I think many people would endorse. So, yeah, McCullum seems like he could be the one change. Judging by what we saw, understandable. And there's another Ashes in 18 months, and England need to turn up. They've not won any of the 4-5 match series against India and Australia in recent times, and it's not good enough.
Martin, if we were talking about the fate of Brendan McCullum, what do you feel deserves greater focus? Should it be the on-pitch results or the off-field culture? Where's the most improvement needed?
Well, the problem you have is when the two collide, which they did in the Ashes, and when you're in the middle of a series where you have not prepared, where you are playing football on the side of the pitch while the Australians are going through their field in practice, where the players have been videoed out, 1 or 2 of them looking the worse for wear with drink, where they are now putting a curfew on them to be in for 12 o'clock. You can get away with that if you win in series. And Brendan McCullum and this era has made England's Test cricket team much more watchable to a broader viewership than was previously the case. Those of us who prefer Test cricket by a mile to T20 have been really enthused by the job they've done. What they've learned to do is beat the lesser teams, but they haven't yet been able to transfer that into the big games against the likes of India and Australia away from home. When you leave yourself wide open with the lack of preparation, you have to win, and they haven't. And the series was dead after 11 games, when everybody was really looking forward to it. The one thing with McCullum is he didn't seem in an interview like he was admitting that he'd done anything wrong, and for that, it looks like he may be the one that has to fall on his sword for that. I just found it interesting in Elizabeth Ammond's story in my paper, The Times, where Robert Key is himself taking a leading role in the ECB review of the Ashes debacle. And I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure you should be the person that's reviewing where everything went wrong when you're one of the people that decided it. But yeah, there we go.
Let's talk about a man who he's in a position of leadership and authority, but whether he continues in it is kind of really seems up to him because he's been incredibly successful. That's Luke Donald, who led Europe to back-to-back Ryder Cup victories after winning at Bethpage Black in New York last year. And of course, no one has done it 3 times in a row with Europe, so a chance to cement his own legacy. David, do you think that this is his job to lose, really?
Absolutely, it is. And if he accepts it, it's going to be him leading the European team in Ireland, possibly against Tiger Woods, which might be one of the motivating factors or a factor to dissuade somebody, because that will be something of a circus. There's a really good piece in The Telegraph weighing up the pros and cons. There's so much support for him. There's history on the line. He's incredibly popular inside and outside of the team. He probably gives Europe their best chance, but there's family concerns, the amount of travel you have to do in the lead up. He's got young daughters who are at school and going back and forth. The amount you put into this in terms of the venue and the organisation, the issues around the live players, Rahm and Hatton. So it's not a straightforward decision, but the noises coming from him and the camp are that he's very tempted to and will probably do it. But with Luke Donald, he always thinks these things through very carefully. So we probably won't know for a month or so. But that temptation to etch his name into the annals of history even further is surely one he can't turn down.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Thank you, Martin. We're going to call it there. If you missed any of the show, then there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight, 1:30. The show also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Well, no doubt about the most shocking results of the night in the Champions League. City's 3-1 defeat at Bodo Glimt.